Welcome to the Death Talk podcast. The vision for this podcast is to break the culture of silence surrounding death and dying. I'm your host, Lisa Murray. I'm so happy to have Ashley Jones on the podcast today because Ashley started a really wonderful organization called Love Not Lost. It's lovenotlost.org. And I'm just so glad you're here. I was crying watching stuff on your website and anyway, so thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really honored to be on your podcast, and then, just being able to have these conversations, I think, is so critical.
Yes, definitely. And then I saw this line on your website. It says, Love Not Lost is on a mission to revolutionize the way we heal in grief.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes, it is. It's one thing, to experience grief, but it's a whole nother thing to know what to do with that. And so we want to help people because we recognize there aren't a lot of people talking about it.
Yeah. And can you let the listeners know what it is that you do? What is Love Not Lost?
Yeah. So Love Not Lost is a nonprofit that I started after losing my daughter to a terminal illness. And and so, kind of what I said before is just, I went through grief and obviously lost my daughter when she was 21 months old. She was diagnosed at 2 months old. So we had 19 months of knowing and preparing and taking care of her and doing everything we could to give her the best life possible. And then losing her, it was so painful, but it was also like really surprising just how, I had never been taught how to grieve. And there's so many big emotions when you experience loss, and so many mixed emotions. And it's just really hard to know what to do with all of that, and then how to heal, because you're just like, I feel like I'm a freaking mess right now.
Yes.
I'm either tangled or shattered or broken in some way. And how do I put these pieces back together? Or how do I untangle this mess? And I think, for me, I went through this journey of figuring that out. And one of the things that was just the biggest tool through everything were photos. And someone had gifted us a professional portrait session when Skyler was 5 or 6 months old. And we did this really beautiful session. The photographer was amazing. Her nieces had the same condition that my daughter had. And so she was fully aware of the situation and just had so much empathy and caring and understanding through it. And printed out some photos for us and gave them to us. And we had them in picture frames around our house. And basically, through the grief, those photos were my sacred, safe space to grieve however I needed to be. So for example, when people would come over, even with the best intentions, they would bring fear or worry or expectations or even judgment. And even if they didn't, sometimes just their presence would trigger those fears and worries inside of me. And so what I realized were just the photos, I could sit and hold them, and it gave me a way to hold my daughter when she wasn't here to hold. I could also sit with them and ugly cry with snot pouring out my face. And it was no one was there to judge me for that.
Right.
And so I just realized wow, these photos are giving me the healing power that I needed to just sit and feel the emotions and let them out. And so that was something I wanted to give to other people. So anyone I heard of facing a terminal diagnosis, I would offer a free portrait session. And so it was just, I it was probably a year after she died when I heard of a family in our church, and the dad had stage 4 melanoma cancer. And I was like, please let me do this. And the mom was like, we would love that. And I ended up photographing him 3 times. The third was on his very last day on earth, which we weren't aware of. And I put together a book with the highlights of their session and gave it to them. And the mom called me a couple months later and was like, Ashley, I just want you to know like how much this book has meant to our family. And I'm thinking like, oh yeah, it's helping her because it helped me and that's awesome. That's what I wanted.
Right.
But she's like, no, like anytime someone comes over to the house, her daughter, she had a daughter and a son, and they were probably like 4 and 5 years old at the time.
Oh.
She was like, my daughter, anytime someone new comes over, she takes them by the hand, walks them into the living room and sits them down on the sofa and introduces them to her daddy through that photo book.
Oh my God.
And she tells the story with so much pride and just is so full of love. And I was just like, you know, like my breath just got sucked out of me because I was just like, wow, like that's so powerful.
I just got chills just picturing how that's going to affect her also for the rest of her life in such a positive way. Wow.
Right. And those photos are a way to connect with your loved one even after they're gone. And they make them feel close because really like in the spiritual world, I believe they are close still, but it's hard to feel that. And so I think photos give us that relationship in a tangible way when they're not tangibly here with us. So long story short, I started doing more and more of those, and every story had like a different impact. So like, you know, I could go on for days with stories of the people that I photographed, but all that to say, I was doing a lot of sessions and each one was so meaningful that I was like, I have to keep doing this. And my husband lovingly came to me and was like, please stop doing this because we have bills to pay and you are giving everything away for free and costing us money. and we are not rich and we cannot sustain this.
Right.
And I was like, I totally understand where you're coming from, but I really believe this is part of my life work. And this is part of, you know, the purpose of our suffering is to help other people going through this. And so we just agreed that, okay, we'll find a way to make it work. And I just said, you know, I'm willing to give this all away. And if I'm willing to give it all away, I think I can find other people out there who are willing to help me give it all away too. And so I'm going to start a nonprofit and we'll accept donations. And as we get donations, we can serve more families. And so that's what we do. At Love Not Lost, we have 3 programs. The first is our photography program. And so we provide portrait sessions that are professional quality to families facing a terminal diagnosis, with a goal to preserve memories and celebrate life with them. And then we give them a really beautiful, like wedding album quality, heirloom book to support their family members in grief.
Nice. And also I like that it's printed. That's an important aspect to what you do.
It is. Yeah, it is. And so, and so the story, you know, of Rachel and her daughter, you know, using the book to connect with her father. It was really cool because Rachel probably like a year later called me and we still keep in touch. And she was like, hey, I want you to know something. And I was like, yeah, what's up? And she's like, yeah, so I sent the book on tour. And I was like, what? And she was like, oh yeah, I mailed it to our family in California and they're sharing it with all of his friends and family. Because her husband, Kevin, was from California. And so she's like, it's on tour and hopefully I'll get it back. But in the meantime, like everyone's sharing it and having their own time with it to just be with those photos and to share, you know, those memories. So I thought that was really special too, because that's like something I hadn't thought of, you know, just how the book would impact a family in that way.
Right. Were you a photographer before? I just want to ask you that really fast.
Yes, I had really served as more of like a freelance photographer. And then once Skyler died, I knew that I couldn't really go back to the corporate world because they would fire me in a week. Because I was such a disaster. Right. I was like, no one really knows how to deal with a mom grieving their child.
Oh
So,
gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, okay, I can barely function. The corporate world won't give me a job. And so, or certainly like won't keep me around. And so what do I do? And so that's really what inspired me to start my own photography business. Cause I had been playing with that on the side before I got pregnant. And then I realized like, you know what, this is really important and I want to do this full time.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. I'm sorry. So you were going to say the other components of Love Not Lost. So the first one is a photography session.
Yep. So we have the photography program, then we have our community support program. And really that's to provide ways for people to show up for people who are hurting in their own lives. So as we were showing up to photograph people, we heard stories over and over again of my community has disappeared and people who I thought were my friends have just completely fallen off the face of the planet.
Right.
And it was like, dang, like this is, you know, these people are in the hardest, darkest part of their lives. Like they need community. And then I started speaking. So I do a lot of speaking for like companies and, you know, conferences and stuff like that.
Oh, great.
And as I was speaking, people would come up to me afterwards and say, oh my gosh, my coworker just lost her baby, or my neighbor just lost their dad. Like, what do I do? And the more and more that happened, I was like, okay, like, so it's not that people don't want to show up. And it's not that people disappear on purpose because they're heartless, you know, jerks.
Right.
It's because they really like don't have the tools and they don't have the words to know how to show up.
Right. And they don't want to say the wrong thing. So they don't say a lot of the time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so it's like people get stuck in this fear. And so, you know, the driving question of Love Not Lost is how can we love people better? Because we believe that in love and showing up in love is where the healing occurs. So
definitely. Oh, that's lovely. I love that.
Yeah. So we started asking, okay, how can we love people better? You know, these people that I'm speaking to, the families that we're serving, how can we love them better? And we saw this gap of, okay, we have these people over here who are hurting. We have people who want to show up and they just don't know how. So let's bridge that gap. And we created community support tools. One is a digital website called howcaniloveyoubetter.com. And it's an email version of a form that says, hey, I know you're going through a tough time right now. How can I help you? And then it gives check boxes that you can customize, or it has pre-filled out ones. Yeah.
That is so smart. So like a form letter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then,
oh my God, the customizable. That is amazing. Yes. Love that.
And then it has a calendar plugin too. So you can say, hey, I can bring you coffee on Friday at noon.
Are you kidding me? That's amazing.
Yeah. And so, and so you can say like, hey, I'm willing to bring you coffee, or you can give like a whole bunch of options. That's like, hey, I'm willing to send you flowers or bring you chocolate or take you dinner or get you out of the house or whatever.
Mow your lawn or whatever.
Yeah, totally. And then it emails them, and then the recipient can say, I want this done at this date and time. And then that gets emailed back to you. And then you can say, cool, I can do that. Or, hey, that time doesn't work for me, but let's try this time.
I like that.
So yeah. So the howcaniloveyoubetter.com. And we have like, you can go to the website and kind of like look through it, but we have like different options. So people, you know, like some people aren't comfortable with the word love. Like I wouldn't necessarily send that to, well, I would send it to a coworker, but there are some people out there who don't feel comfortable using the word love with a coworker.
Right.
At Love Not Lost, that's a part of our culture. So people know that I'm not being a weirdo, but, but we know that, you know, there are different relationships. So some people you're really close with, and maybe you want to help a neighbor who you don't really know that well, but you want to show up for them too.
Right.
So we have like, instead of saying like, how can I love you better? It says like, how can I support you? So there are two versions too. Like, you know, especially for dudes who like might not tell another dude they love them, you know?
So, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you know,
right. Yeah.
like support you.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was a big thing. We wanted it to be something that everyone felt comfortable using, no matter the relationship type, gender, anything like that. So
that's very thoughtful. I like that you include that. Good job.
Yeah. So, and then we're working on creating, you know, we have some options right now for like, if you live close versus if you live far away. We're still working on building that out more, but yeah, so that's a digital form. We also have a postcard version, that we started with, which we give out at events. We're developing a line of empathy cards. Right now we have two cards that are in print, and we have some more that we're working on the design right now. And then we have gift accession certificates. So like people always say like, oh, you know, I know this person has a terminal illness, but like, I don't know how to tell them about love not lost without being awkward or offensive. And so we created a gift accession certificate where someone can present it as a gift card or like a gift certificate to say, hey, like, you know, you're being gifted a session. So it's like, you know, stuff like that. Again, just like, how can we love people better? That's like the driving question that has like created these solutions. And then the last program that we have right now is the corporate care program. And as I mentioned before, I knew that the corporate world would not take me back because I was a hot mess of emotions and grief. And so, you know, looking at the people that we're serving, some of the families that we would photograph would say, Ashley, you know, I'm really concerned because my job only gives me this much time off, and taking care of my sick husband, I've already used that time and I don't know if I'm going to keep my job. We had one woman say her husband had cancer and she had 2 twin daughters, and he was on hospice, and she was like, I just got let go of my job. And she's like, not only do I not know how to pay my mortgage, but I don't know how to, like, we just lost our health insurance because that was through my work. And I don't know how to take care of my husband and my daughters while going through this.
That's awful.
Yeah. And so we were like, yeah, this is terrible. And in the midst of all that, we were hearing, you know, again, people at work saying, hey, my coworker just went through this loss. Like, I don't know what to do. What can I do for them?
Right.
And that is a unique relationship, right? Because there's, depending on the culture, especially. So that was something that inspired us to develop the corporate care program, where we bring grief and empathy training to the workplace. So right now we have different workshops for leadership. We will have future workshops for whole teams and company-wide training, but right now we're just starting with the leadership.
Okay, I'm like totally blown away by you. And no, really, like you really are like 100% committed to this, and
yes,
committed to, you know, being that message of how can we love better. And it's just like anytime another problem comes up to your feet or some type of thing that someone brings you, you figure it out and you set it up. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, thank you so much for being such a good person. Like, this is like,
you're welcome.
I'm like crying. I'm like so amazed by you. Wow. Cause
thank you.
There's so many things to unpack here. There's so many like levels to it. And one thing I want to say before I forget anything is that I love the website idea, because like the thing that you would, the form letter thing, because I'm like a big texter. I love texting. I don't like calling people unless we have a scheduled call. Like I just don't, I don't know. And, unless I'm calling to just, you know, check on them and they know me, like that's different. Cause there is something about the warmth of a voice and all of that. But in general, especially when I was mourning, especially when I was, you know, in the midst of all the grief and trauma and all that stuff, texting really was the best way, or email, but texting and something like just a checkbox situation like that. Because one of the things that I really never understood about grief until I went through it is I didn't want to be a grief educator at that moment. And I felt like I had to educate everybody how to be around me. And I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
can't do this. Like, it's too exhausting. So I just shut down.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they maybe felt like, oh, well, whatever. I guess I can't do anything. This is like the perfect
Mm-hmm.
answer to that. And I mean, maybe for some
Yeah.
people, but I love
Well,
that.
yeah. Yeah. I think, another thing that we saw too is that, for people who haven't lost and they want to reach out and help, it can be really awkward. And when it feels awkward, it comes out awkward.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's like, even with best intentions, when you're like, hey, I know, your daughter died. Oh, was I supposed to say that? It's like
Yeah.
there's all this like, oh, and so like an email just takes out the awkwardness, because it's like, you don't have to worry about stumbling over words. You don't have to worry, like you
Yeah.
don't have to work on thinking on your toes. Like in the moment, you can like think through what you're going to say and just send it,
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, that was the hope, is that we can really equip people who might not feel comfortable and don't know what to say. Because another thing that we just hear over and over and over again is people will be like, okay, let me know if you need anything. Bye.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
or it's like, oh, well, let me know what you need and I'll be there. But it's like,
Right.
sometimes when you're grieving, you don't even know what you need.
Right.
And so seeing a list right in front of you where you're like, oh yeah, that might actually be really helpful. Let's do that,
Yeah.
can be really great.
And also, like, sometimes at like 3 a.m, I'm like, for a long time, I didn't want to eat. But then when I did, I'm like, I want a casserole or, something weird at like 3 a.m. But if I
Yeah.
could like text or email that back to someone and be like, actually, this is
Mm-hmm.
something I would want, I wouldn't know it in the moment too. That's the other thing about if people come up to you
Mm-hmm.
and ask you, it's like
Right.
your brain is like somewhere else. So maybe, like I've said, like 3 a.m, all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I really need help with this one thing that I haven't been able to finish or whatever.
Yeah.
And being able to respond to that after you've had some time to like sit with it is also very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also, right when all this happened to me, I realized that I probably never said the right thing up until that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you just don't know. And I was kind of
Right.
like, I was so, this is why I wanted to start this podcast, but I was
Mm-hmm.
so like in touch with how crazy it is that we do not talk about this more
Right.
as a regular thing, because that's why I never knew what to say, because I didn't hear anybody saying anything like this. I just saw stuff in movies. Like
Right.
that's it. That's all or like a funeral and people are kind of talking quietly. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what you're supposed to say. And I saw that energy in all the people that came up to me. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, oh, this is gross. Like they're feeling gross. I feel gross. It's like, we need to stop this. Like we need to change this. So I see it as like a sledgehammer.
Mm-hmm.
To me, death is like a room inside of a house that nobody goes into. And so
Mm.
everybody's in all the other rooms and they're all da 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 da. And then they maybe whisper and slip back into that room and slip back out. And nobody sees what's happening. And
Yeah.
why did they go in there? What is in there? And so I see like there's this whole that positive death talk movement of people just taking a sledgehammer to that wall and being like, this has to come down. We need to have this part of our regular lives, because it is
Absolutely.
part of our regular lives. We are all
Yeah.
going to die, and
Yeah.
we're all going to experience death. And the more we can talk about it on all levels, the more those moments of walking up to someone and saying, I am so sorry for your loss.
Mm-hmm.
That can come from a real place instead of like,
Yes.
I'm sorry for your loss, or I'm
Right.
sorry. If there's anything I can do, let me know. Like there's this tone that it just drives me nuts. I'm like,
Yeah.
so yeah. So you're part of that sledgehammer crew.
For sure. Yeah. And that's like, I mean, I think that was what was so shocking for me. So I had Skyler, my daughter, when I was 25, and she died when I was 27.
Oh,
And
oh my gosh, I'm so
like,
sorry.
as a 27-year-old, you're like, I'm almost 30. Like, I should be a pretty grown adult by now. Right. So you're like, how do I not know how to grieve?
Right.
Like, how do I not know what to do with this at all? Like, how did I get to 27 years old? I am a college graduate. I went to church. I had 2 parents growing up. It's like, how did I get through all of this without learning how to grieve? And, it's just one of those things where it's like, wow. And there's so many facets to grieving too. And I understand. So there are a couple things. I understand why people don't tackle it because it's really freaking hard.
Right.
Everyone has such a unique journey that there's no blanket, this is how you grieve.
Right. Right.
And so that's hard, right? Like I acknowledge that. However, there are questions we can ask ourselves that will give us each individual unique answers that can help us. So I'm actually writing a book on grieving right now. And, and that's part of the book is building your own self-care toolkit.
Oh,
because
Ashley, you're on a roll. Oh my God. So much is coming out of you. This is like amazing.
So part of grieving is self-care.
Right.
So making sure that you're taking care of yourself. You're hurting. And that's what people don't realize is that grief is a pain. And when you have pain, you have to nurse yourself back to health. Instead of just like shutting down or numbing out. So how do we take care of ourselves? Well, that's something else that I wasn't really taught. Like when I first got married, my husband was like, what do you like to do to rest? And I was like, sleep. Like, is there another answer to that?
Yeah, on, off. It's like,
and
those
he was like,
switches.
Yeah, he was like, no, not sleep, but like rest. And I was like, I have to really think about this. Like, I don't know what brings me rest. And so as I like sat with that, I was like, okay, I think like reading a book outside or taking a nap in a hammock or sitting by a river or hiking through the woods or, you know, stuff like that brings me rest.
Right.
So
I've never heard it worded like that. That's actually launched me into thinking, well, how do I rest? I don't know if I do. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so it's like, what are things that like refill your soul? Because so many of the time, or so much of the time, especially in the world that we live in, we're praised when we're like running on fumes.
Right. Yep.
You know, it's like, okay, like I accomplished this and I'm busy now and I'm doing this and all of these things are happening and like good for me. But then you're like inside, you're like just on gas and you're like, I literally just have fumes left in my tank. Mm-hmm. And so then when a crisis happens, you like go into full out anxiety or panic attack or like really bad health problems because your body's like, oh, like you weren't taking care of me. And now I'm like, you know, pushed over the edge. Mm-hmm. So like when Skyler got her diagnosis, she was 2 months old. And my thyroid went hyperactive.
Oh gosh.
It did this huge hormone dump into my system, which gave me heart palpitations. And I developed Raynaud's condition, like an autoimmune circulation problem.
Oh my gosh. I've never heard of it. What's it called?
Raynaud's.
Raynaud's.
Yeah. So it's like you don't get circulation in your fingertips or your toes. So like sometimes I'll look down and like my toes will be like bright purple.
Oh my gosh.
Or my fingers will be like white as ghost.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I had never heard of it before either. And I looked down, just like, it was probably, let's see, she was 2 months old. So it was like January. So it was probably like February in our house and it was cold. And I looked down and my toes were bright purple. And I called my husband and I was like, I think I have frostbite. And he was like, you're inside, like you don't have frostbite. And I'm like, but my toes are bright purple. So anyway, that's how I found that out.
Oh my God. What was your daughter? I'm sorry, but what was your daughter diagnosed with?
Oh yeah. She had a condition called spinal muscular atrophy. So it's really similar to Lou Gehrig's or ALS.
Oh, wow.
Where like all muscles degenerate and there's no cure.
Oh.
Yeah. So she had the more severe form and the doctors were like, you'll be lucky to see her first birthday.
Oh gosh.
But we had the help of a researcher who had dedicated her career to SMA. And she went on hospice at 10 months old. I called the researcher because I was just going to donate her body to science because like none of her organs were able to like save any other babies. Because they were all just like so, I don't know, like degenerated at that point that, you know, like I'm a huge believer in organ donation, but I was like really sad. But I was like, hey, we might be able to help this researcher who's dedicated her career. So we called her and actually she was the one who was like, hey, I think your daughter will be fine if you just get rid of your pulmonologist who doesn't know what the crap she's doing, and follow my instruction. And sure enough, she like doubled her life, and my daughter made it to 21 months old. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was incredible.
And what was the person doing wrong? Was it a medicine situation or what was it?
No. So at night, like naturally your breathing lessens, like the breathing functionality lessens when you sleep. But like most healthy people don't even know a difference, and, are perfectly fine. But because she was already weak in her respiratory, muscles, when she would sleep, her oxygen would desaturate down into like the 70s, and she would turn a little bit blue.
Oh my gosh.
So when she slept, and even during nap time, we would put her on a BiPAP machine, and that would just help support her and clear out any secretions while she was sleeping, as well as, helping her get the CO2 out. So, yeah. So
that's what extended her life double.
Yeah. So what was happening was the pulmonologist just really didn't know how to care for SMA patients and didn't know the settings well. And so she was just really, really under-supported in her breathing. And the researcher was like, I'm going to teach you how to hack into the machine, follow my lead on changing the settings. And then when you get to this point, then there's nothing else you can do. So yeah, we had another 11 months with her, which was phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Because you think about like from 10 months to 21 months, they just developed so much personality then.
Right.
And it was such a joy and a gift to be able to witness that.
Oh, and I don't want to talk badly about doctors because I think doctors are amazing, but it's just another example of like trust, they're just people too. And they're going to know what they're going to know. And like, if you, get a second opinion or try something else, like it's not a bad thing. It could totally change your life or the life of the person you're caring for. So. Yeah.
I mean, if I hadn't called the researcher, like we would have probably lost her at like 10 or 11 months old. And yeah, so again, I fully agree with you. Doctors are amazing. We had some incredible doctors in other areas of her care. But yeah, the pulmonologist one, we obviously got a new pulmonologist after that. And our second pulmonologist was phenomenal. And she was really great and supportive. And it was definitely better.
And was the first, I just want to ask this, was the first did you let her, it was a female, right?
Yes.
Did you let her know about this new information and then, or I'll just leave it at that. Did you let her know about the new information?
I did.
Sounds like she resisted it.
Yeah. And honestly, it was just frustrating because I've since talked to other SMA patients who've had to work with her, and she's just, not the best pulmonologist to work with in the case of SMA. I'll just leave it at that.
And it sounds like she's probably not, maybe she's in her ego and she's always, trying to prove something instead of really being committed to her, what it is. And it's always changing
that's what
and
it
moving.
Felt like. And it was, it was really frustrating because it was like, this is my daughter's life. Like, this is not, I don't think less of you as a doctor, but like, I do think less of you as a person when you're not willing to let me switch doctors because you really don't know what you're doing and you're not able to admit that.
Oh, that's so hard. Well, I'm really glad that you pushed and that, I feel like there's something bigger that guides us. And I think you were guided to call that researcher and then, move on and move past that person, because that is really unfortunate. I mean, we're talking about lives here. I don't understand how anybody could be like, she could just be like, okay, look, I disagree with this. I don't really get it, but okay, let me let this go because this is your daughter. It's her life.
I will say we had a GI doctor. So one thing with an SMA baby, their muscles are so weak and they aspirate. So my daughter started aspirating at 3 months old. And so we had to get a G tube placed so that we could bypass her swallow. And one of the things that, with a normal G tube, it's like a 30-minute surgery, and it's pretty simple. But we were checked into the hospital. We had to stay there a day to get her ready, and we were like probably an hour away from the surgery. And the GI doctor comes in, and he was like, "Hey, I'm so sorry, but I was talking to my colleagues at lunch, and with an SMA baby, the best protocol is a G-tube plus a Nissen fundoplication." And basically what that does is it takes the upper part of the stomach and kind of like loops it around the esophagus, maybe. I'm not a huge anatomy person, but and stitches it so that when the stomach contracts to vomit, it actually closes off the esophagus, so it prevents someone from vomiting.
Oh.
And that's so important because a lot of SMA kids can drown in their own vomit because they aspirate.
Yeah.
And so even though if you're bypassing the swallow with a G-tube, if they vomit and they choke on that, then they could die.
Oh, gosh.
Plus infections and all other stuff.
Right.
So he was like, the problem is a Nissen fundoplication is a much more extensive surgery, and it's going to take longer than we have allotted for today. And so we're going to have to send you home and have you come back for another surgery another day. And it's really frustrating because obviously, we still have to pay the insurance bills for being in the hospital for pre-surgery stuff. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then we have to go home and then come back, and we've been exposed to germs, and she has a compromised immune system and all of that.
Oh my gosh.
Everything in me was like pissed, right? Because you're like, oh, like this is so annoying. Like, why didn't you do your research? Why didn't you know better? Blah, blah, blah. But the mom and like the human in me was like, oh my gosh, thank you for not putting my daughter through this surgery just to protect your own ego.
Right.
Because he could have just not said anything and done the procedure and then been like, oh, by the way, we have to do this other procedure next, or just not have even shared that.
Right.
And so for me, I was like, I told him, I was like, this is really disappointing. And it's mildly frustrating, but I am so grateful, so grateful that you are willing to share this with us. And we would be happy to come back another time to do the right thing and save my daughter, another surgery or something else. And so that's an example of a doctor who really did go above and beyond his ego to do the best thing for our daughter. And that was something I was just eternally grateful for.
Yeah. And that sounds like it would be really hard. Like I'm getting uncomfortable even trying to put myself in his position. I'm like, oh my God, I have to go tell them. I mean, I feel bad rescheduling like a coffee meeting, I'd be like, but I'm so glad. Yeah. That it's like, we're in this together. We're all human beings. We're all trying to figure it out. And doctors know a lot of medical stuff and it's cool, but we all make mistakes. We all don't know everything. And the important thing is to lead with love and respect and do the best you can. And if that means go out there and admit like, hey, what we were going to do isn't going to work. That's huge. That's so huge.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go back to, there's so many things I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
One of the things is, where do I start? Okay. So when I went to your website, lovenotlost.org, I went through all these different emotions. Cause first I was like, photography when they're terminally ill, from the terminally ill people I knew. Well, it's different levels to that, but immediately my immediate thought was, I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, cause they don't look like they're at their best. They probably don't feel at their best. And then I can hear other people saying, well, I don't want to remember them that way. What do you say about that part of it? And then I have something to say about how I came out of that thought process, but I want to hear what I'm sure you get that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what was interesting, was when we first started, we partnered with hospices because we were like, hey, like you have people who are for sure going to pass away. And, we would love to be able to serve your patients and help those families. And we got a decent number of referrals, but what we realized was just that a lot of people were like, oh, like, I don't want to be remembered this way. The person with the illness saying that. And then family members saying like, oh, like they're just not themselves. Like, I don't know if this is a good idea. And there were plenty of people who were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Yes, I want to do this. But we did get a good number of the other as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so a few things to that. One, we now partner with hospitals to try and catch them as soon as they're diagnosed, because usually they're still feeling good. They still look like themselves, and maybe they're just starting chemo or radiation or, whatever other treatment they might be on. And so that's one thing that we've done to try and like be more proactive on getting the diagnosis as soon as we can. The second thing is that just encouraging families that like you can take the pictures and never look at them again, but we can't go back and take these photos.
That's great. See, I knew you had a little jewel of wisdom in there. That's it. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So it's like, I would so much rather show up and photograph these moments together and these memories. And if you want them, you have them. But like, if we get 10 years down the road and you're wishing you had these and you don't, that's like a horrible place and emotion to feel, like that regret. And
Right.
So like, let us just show up and take the photos and trust us that we will do everything we can to give you like really beautiful, lovely photos that will like, give you hopefully peace and love 10 years from now. Because even so, Kevin, the guy that I was telling you about before with the stage 4 melanoma, when he and his wife, Rachel, called me for the third session, it was a Christmas time session. And basically he was like I showed up and he was a man in his 30s who looked like he was 85 years old.
Oh.
He looked so like cancer had just eaten him alive. And so his skin was yellow, like it was rough, and it was hard to look at because you're like, man, that guy's 30 something and that is just not a 30 something year old man. But what was so beautiful was like, we were able to get close-ups of Rachel holding his hand and just doing like close-ups of the hands, or like there was one, the little girl had a t-shirt on that said, "I love my daddy." And it was in the shape of a Christmas tree. And so I had her hold her shirt out. She was on the end of the bed. The dad was laying in bed and he couldn't really move. He was laying in bed with his head propped up, and she's on the foot of the bed with her shirt, standing on the bed with her shirt, pulled out so we could read it. And she's really sharp focus, and then he's blurred out in the background.
Wow, that's powerful.
So you can't really see the detail of his face or the bandages or anything like that, but he's there.
Right.
And so that's like, oh, like I wish more people would understand that. Like photographers really are artists in the sense that we can create really beautiful moments based on the circumstances that maybe you might not see.
And if you picked up your phone and took pictures, it wouldn't be the same thing too.
Right. I mean, iPhone portrait mode is getting there, but it's still not the same.
But because you're not a person, well, not you, but the other person isn't trained to be a photographer, they probably wouldn't know to like, oh, this is brilliant. Have the daughter, in the forefront and all that other stuff. Yeah. So my journey, after I was like, my initial thought was like, well, I don't know, like who would want to do that? And I know people resist that. I'm a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker on top of it. So I am always filming people. I'm always taking photos too. And, I can be really quiet and be in the place. And a lot of the places I go, people know me now. And it's like, they just get it. I have a camera in my hand all the time. So I understand it from a different perspective, but I did still feel that initial, like,
sure,
what would other people say about this? But then I think about, it wasn't a professional shoot, but I wish it was. But towards the end of my grandmother's life, I remember there was this one time she was in a hospital bed in her room, and it was before digital. I think it was before digital. And I bent over and I put my head next to her, and I told whoever it was, I said, take a picture of me with Grammaire. And they go, you don't want this picture. I go, yeah, I do. I want a picture with her. And I remember there was some part of me that kind of thought, well, do I really want this picture with her? I have a lot of really great pictures with her when she looks really great and she's lively. And I thought, no, and she was awake. She was looking in the camera too. But I love that picture because we thought when she came home from the hospital that she was going to just die because she had stopped talking, and she was
Mm.
88 or 89, I think, when she got brought back from the hospital to her house. But she ended up living 3 years with 24-hour nursing.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
during that time, I had moved there. Intuitively, I felt like I was supposed to go. I didn't know what was going to happen. It's a long other story. But point is, I was there in a weird way, and I ended up staying with her at her house until she died because I wanted to make sure she was okay. She was really important to me, and I could do that at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when I see that picture, I remember how I felt being there, how
Mm-hmm.
proud I was that I was there, even though I had no idea how long I'd be there, and how hard it was too, because some of the nurses were horrible and some of them were great.
Yeah.
And seeing my grandmother in the condition where she couldn't talk, but this is the part that I'm trying to get to. She was still there.
Mm-hmm.
She was still there, regardless if she wasn't there the way that I was used to her being, with giggling and going out to dinner. She was still there. And when I look at that picture, that's what I see. She was still there with me at that
Mm-hmm.
time. And that is what I think of when I think of these photography sessions, is that when you're going through it, and I've even had another friend who had breast cancer, and she documented her journey because she had a newborn baby on YouTube. Her name is Christina Newman. She had a big following, and she documented it through video. And the thing is that when you're in it, you're just seeing the person deteriorating. And so you're seeing how they aren't themselves anymore. And then that brings so much pain. But when I look back at those videos, or look back at any photos at that time, my photo with her actually at that time, I'm like, she's still there. She was still there at that time. And that's what you hold on to, is like, wow, and the final thing, I'm sorry, I'm talking so much, but this
You're
has
good.
opened up so much for me. The final thing is that you're capturing a time in a very huge, probably more, the most important time in a family's life, more than a graduation or at Christmas or anything like that. And even though you might not think the photos are the best photo of your loved one, you're capturing a time when you guys were all dealing with something that was extremely stressful and it was extremely sad, but you were all together and there was so much love there. And you're capturing that. And that is what makes what you do so, on top of being amazing, I think is out of the park beautiful. So thank you for conceptualizing this and actually setting it all up and doing it. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and another perspective too, like that I experienced. So, we had a professional session with our daughter when she was 6 months old. And then actually when the photographer learned that she made it to her 1-year birthday, she came back and did another session at 16 months old. But at that point, Skyler had like really started deteriorating and just like wasn't feeling good. So she had a bad day, and like those photos aren't the best photos. Like they're, she's fussy, is not smiling at all, and is just like, meh.
Yeah.
Like you look back at those photos and you're like, oh, that sucks. They're beautiful of my husband and I, but of her, that's just like, oh man, that wasn't a good day.
Right.
But that is also the reality, was like, there weren't good days. And as she got older, like even, I took some photos of her in her nursery, crib bed where, she was probably like 18 or 19 months, and she's just like not happy. You can tell she doesn't feel good. And honestly, like those photos bring me peace of like, we made the right decision to let her go.
Right.
Because like I could see her feeling worse and worse as the photos progressed. And like, even though they're not my favorite photos to look back on for sure, like they're not fun to look at, but they do bring me peace in the sense that like, she's not suffering anymore. Like she's not in that body that is causing her pain and like having to deal with Lord knows what that she can't communicate to us, it was for me, those photos are almost a comfort and affirmation of like, okay, that was the right call. She was miserable. And like, cause it got to the point where we had to like, quote unquote, pull the plug. And it was just like, it was like the hardest decision you've ever had to make. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like, how do you make that decision? you know?
Right. So much responsibility. That's such a huge decision. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
My husband and I had both told each other that if we get to the point where we're both on life support, like we don't want to be there. Like that is not a quality of life. And based on our faith that there's something else beyond this human experience, like just let us go, you know? And so we were like, why would we not want that for our daughter, even though selfishly we want as much time as we can with her here, you know? So that was a really, really, really tough call, but it was like the photos looking back, like give us affirmation of like, yeah, she was suffering. Like she wasn't happy. She was in pain. And so I think that can be a gift too.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think part of grief is denial too. And so you start to go into all these different things of like, were they really sick? I mean, we could have probably done more. Like, why didn't we try, you know? So yeah, something like that. And also just I don't know if you've heard of Kevin Toulis. He has a book called My Father's Wake. It's oh, you have? Oh, good. Well,
they actually sent it to me.
Oh, good. I like that he talks about how the kids are all part of the funeral and everybody, and that the dead body is there and it's part of I'm taking it into death right now, but I think it's connected in terms of grounding the dying process and grounding death into a real tangible thing. That, I mean, I remember when my grandfather died and I was 16 and I was mortified that he had an open casket. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to go up there. But as the service went on, by the end, I went up there and I actually touched him, and I was like 16. And that was good for me because I felt so connected to his spirit that when I touched his hand, I realized, oh, he's not in his body.
Right.
He's definitely not in there. This is a vessel. It's just like clay. It's just like nothing.
Totally.
That's it. He's gone, but he's still here. So yeah. And I think that we need those types of things that give us the visual and the tactile connection to this whole process. And the photos, I mean, I'm really picturing like holding a photo, an actual photo, and what that would bring. It's amazing. And I keep thinking also that we do too much digital photos too. And I think they just get lost.
They get lost, and there really is something sacred about creating a physical space that you don't get with digital. And I can't quite figure out why it's so different. But when you're holding a physical print, there's no distraction. There are no alerts popping up or people calling you or, you know, whatever. There's no distraction, and it's something that you can hold, and it creates like a tangible sensory experience that a phone or a computer screen doesn't create. And so that's why it was so important for us to give a photo album to the families that we serve, but also more importantly, to create something so beautiful and something that was created in such a way that it would last through the generations. So like, I wish I could like describe like how amazing these books are, but they're, you know, they're truly like wedding album, like handcrafted quality, beautiful, beautiful books. So, but real quick before I forget.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
If you liked My Father's Wake, have you read Confessions of a Funeral Director?
No.
Oh my gosh, it has to be next on your list.
Okay, I'm putting that down.
It is so enjoyable. He's such a gifted writer, and just the experiences that he shares. Like if anyone is interested in like the positive, like the death positive conversation, this book is a must. Like, oh, I wish I could remember the author right now. It's not coming to me, but Confessions of a Funeral Director. So good.
Confessions of a Funeral. I need like an assistant, right? That looks it up. You know, they do like on.
Yes, I
know. Okay, let's see. Caleb Wilde.
Yes. Thank you.
Nice.
Caleb Wilde. Yep. So
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to check it out. Would you ever think before you lost your daughter that you would ever say, "Oh, I really enjoyed this book called Confessions of a Funeral Director"?
No, I laugh because when I speak, people always ask me for a bio, and I always joke around and it's like, okay, like, yeah, like I'm a a death and dying and grief specialist or expert or whatever you want to call me. And it's like, yeah, never in my wildest dreams thought that that's where my career path was going to take me.
Right. I know.
Like, yeah.
But you're perfect for it. You have so many solutions and real things that are going to help people. And I just feel like you were perfectly led to it.
For sure. And I'm a really, like, I'm a very like global community minded person. So I really like to tackle issues on like a grand scale. And I'm also like a helper. So I want to, if I see a problem, I want to help and fix it. And then also, I am a very empathetic, like feeler person. So I'm like very in tune with like energy and emotions. And so like when people suffer, like I feel it. Like I can't watch certain movies because I'm like, I will put myself in the situation too much where like it messes me up.
To go back to your toolkit for grievers.
Yeah.
One of the things, I'm an organizer too of like information. And when I was going through all this, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to start a death podcast. And I would say death like very strongly, like,
yes,
I'm going to start a death podcast. Or they'd go, what's it going to be about? I'm like, death. Because my mom even was like, well, shouldn't you call it something, you know, and she's all poetic, like dying to talk to you. I said, no, I want it to be very stark because I want that word to stop having that energy over us.
Right.
But, and so, one of the things I really like actually even got paper out and thought about this because I had something that I call cluster deaths. I had a whole bunch of different kinds of deaths. There were different kinds of deaths, different kinds of relationships with the people, and then different circumstances of their deaths. So I saw it as like an Excel spreadsheet grid thing. And I was like, okay, so if they died unexpectedly, that's somewhere on the graph, right? And then their age, were they, 90 and they died unexpectedly, or were they 10? Did they die violently, or was it not violent? Was it, were they alone, or were they with people? Were they in a medical situation, or were they not yet in a medical situation? I started thinking it all as, because that really has a lot to do with how it affects you. And then also the other part of it is your relationship with the person.
Right.
So a guy that I worked with at a record label that I loved, I didn't see him all the time. I didn't talk to him all the time, but I loved him. And all I had to do is pick up the phone, and we picked up like we never left off. And by pick up the phone, I mean texting.
Sure.
Because, older people will be like, oh, you called him. No, I barely ever talked to him, but I talked to him all the time. But anyways, he was murdered. He was killed in Los Angeles during all this time, right after Derek died and my brother died. And then I'm still inside of this goo of grief. And he was shot in the laundry room of his apartment complex while he was getting ready to actually go to Nigeria. So,
wow.
So I know him very well. I feel very hard to him. And like, we had a really good connection, but I didn't talk to him all the time, and I wasn't related to him. And I don't know. It was like, there's that kind. And then there's, I don't know. You know what I mean? There's like, there's a guy I knew through YouTube that always sent me messages. He was in high school and he came to all my live shows and talked about dreams and filmmaking. And he sent me a really nice email, and he said, I had a choice to go to a college in my town or to go to LA and study my dream, which is filmmaking. And I chose filmmaking because of going to all your live shows. You really inspired me. And I was like, God, this kid is like so nice. It's like almost too nice to be true. But he really was. He was a really good kid. And he came in town. He wanted to meet me during the thing that they do with colleges where they have all the family come in town or whatever. And then I couldn't do it then. So I go, all right, next time. So he went back home for the high school graduation. And there was the tornado that went through, I think it was Missouri or it was a weird area. And he was missing. And he was on CNN. Anderson Cooper was looking for him. So here I am, like, that was a weird grief situation for me because I felt connected to him. He came to all my live shows. He always talked. He had videos that he posted on YouTube. He was a YouTuber. And so we knew each other, but no one in his life probably knew that I knew him. And I didn't know him like his sister knows him. So, there's so many different, so I thought about that grid because I was like, so anyways, I just wanted to tell you about that because maybe you can incorporate that into like a toolkit because that was so important.
We actually have, it's not a grid. I would love to see what you've come up with visually, But we
Okay.
talk a lot about this in our corporate care program because there's also like public versus private grief.
Mm-hmm.
So like some people are very, very public with their grief and they're like, oh, I lost this person, and they post about it on social media. And then other people, you'd like never know anyone died in their life unless you
Right.
saw them at the funeral, you know?
Right.
And then there's, you know, like collective grief. Like, for example, at a company, if like someone in the company died versus like someone in the company lost a spouse, like those are very different, but still very significant griefs.
Right.
And so, yeah. And just like you said, the relationship, were you really close to them? Did you work with them every day, or did you just know them and you just happen to see them in the lunchroom every day or whatever? It's like that all matters. And again, how you, like, just how you said, like how they died, like the people who deal with shock and trauma have a lot more layers to dig through than someone who didn't. And the grief isn't worse, or, you know, like there's no comparison there. It's just like the fact of the matter is your brain processes shock and trauma differently than a standard loss.
Right.
And so it's like neither is like worse or better or whatever. It's just different. And so, but it's important to know that, because if you're dealing with trauma, you have, like, there are different things that you have to do to heal the trauma before you can heal the grief.
Exactly.
And in shock, your body just shuts down as a protective measure. And so you have to wait for your body to come back online before you can heal, you know? But so many people, like, and I think that's why, you know, I get so frustrated when people throw out the 5 stages of grief, because it's like, if you go back to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's research, the 5 stages of grief were meant specifically for people facing their own death.
Good point.
And so everyone, because it was like the first real research on grief, everyone just took that and then like threw it against the wall and let it stick wherever it stuck on other griefs. But like, it's actually not accurate. So the 5 stages of grief were meant for people facing their own death. So if you're facing a different kind of loss, it's going to be different. And grief is so nonlinear. And that's another thing. Like, I hate the stages, because people think like, oh, I'm supposed to do this stage by stage. And it's like, no, like it's a freaking nightmare.
Yeah.
Like it's not linear. Time doesn't heal all wounds. Like, you have to be intentional about your healing for you to actually heal. Like, time helps, but it's not everything, you know? And there's so many misconceptions out there about grief. And again, that's something, you know, I'm addressing in my book and in the corporate care program. But it's like, man, it's so painful because there's so much misinformation. And again, because no one talks about it, no one talks about it. Right. So it's like, okay, like there's no one out there saying, or if there are few of us out there who are trying to change this narrative and get the information out there, but it's because it's not popular and because it's taboo. A lot of us are getting pushed, you know, to the back of the room where it's like, no, don't be quiet.
Yeah, right.
Like, we're not mortal beings. It's fine.
I know. Well, and I think of it more as like a mosaic or a collage of grief. Like I could never see it as stages. I don't understand that. I think that, yeah, I'm glad you said all that. And also to take the graph into like a 3-dimensional space, there's 2 more elements, which is, one is what's going on in your life when the person died. Because okay, if you just got married and you're on your honeymoon and you found out the person was murdered,
right,
that's going to affect you very differently. And I know it sounds crazy, but it is. Then a person who is just a normal day in their life. I mean, it's a big deal. Now they're attaching that death to their marriage, to their wedding, to their, you know, and for me, when my first major person died, Derek, he was run over by a train. It might be a murder, but I was, you know, working in LA, music, and we had a recording studio at our house. We had a film. I'm also a filmmaker. So it's like, I'm doing all this film stuff, working in the industry. I was burning out. And I was thinking to myself, I need to
Yeah.
change something. And I was even having conversations with Derek. He was actually leaving an abusive relationship. And so he, we were talking about that. And then he said, "Are you happy?" And I was like, "No, I'm not happy. Life is hard and I gotta be working all the time. And you just don't understand how competitive it is." And he
Right.
was just laughing. And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "You of all people should be happy." And I thought, and that rings, in my mind all the time now. And I think about that. But less than a week after that conversation, he was killed. And that has totally affected the rest of my life, because even in my healing, I don't want to ever feel that level of busyness again. So I'm very careful. Even if it's healthy busy, I get a little bit, the grief comes back to me and I get really tense and I get really uncomfortable. Like, ew, I don't like this. I'm getting too busy. This doesn't feel comfortable. Something like, it's almost like something bad's going to happen. That's what, but so whatever's going on with you.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing that, another thing that we teach is, listening to your body. Like, our bodies were designed to heal. So when, kind of like the phrase that I've been coined for is to grieve, to heal, we have to grieve. To grieve, we have to feel. And to feel, we have to be present. And so, and that's kind of like, I try and share that as much as I can, because I believe that's true. And that's the key to healing. And so many of us aren't healing because we're checking out, we're staying busy, we're scrolling hours on social media, we're drinking away our problems, we're, like whatever, pick your poison, playing video games or whatever it is.
Right.
It's a way to not be present. And, like, people in our society have taught us that pain is bad, right? Like, all the drug companies market us on, do you have arthritis? Do you have pain? Like, here's ibuprofen, here's this, here's like, all of these drugs to relieve pain.
Yeah, like the commercials start like, "I don't have time for pain." It's like, well, who has time for pain? It's like we schedule it in. I mean, it's just part of life.
Right. And so I think what's so sad is that pain can be our greatest teacher, but we have to listen. And so if we're just numbing it, we're not listening to the ways our bodies are inviting us to heal.
Exactly.
So that's like one thing too, especially like, I mean, just to acknowledge, like, we're talking in the middle of like a crazy global pandemic. There are people dying from the virus. There are people dying because they don't have the support that they need in hospitals because they're overwhelmed. I'm sure there will be people dying just because their basic needs aren't met. And there's just so much grief. And for me, like, my needs are taken care of right now, and I'm not sick, but I know people who are affected, and I have a friend whose cousin's on a respirator right now in New York City. So it's like, yeah, like and I think by the end of all this, we will all be affected in one way or another. And so there's like a lot of grief and healing that needs to be done there. And so, it's just, I think in this time, it's easy to be like, oh, I'm going to use this extra time to like start a new business or learn this or take this course or, learn Spanish or whatever it is. But it's like, I really do believe that this is an invitation for a deeper healing of dealing with all the stuff that we haven't been dealing with as a world, right?
Totally,
like, I mean, even now, what's like, if there is a silver lining to this, it's that, all of the toxic emissions in our world have been drastically reduced, and China's seeing blue skies for the first time in years.
Wow.
Like, the emissions over Italy are almost gone.
Right.
It's just like, even in the world, seeing the healing taking place, but also I think, it's a forced pause for people to spend time with family, to, again, just sit with the really hard things of like, okay, I'm feeling this and this is uncomfortable. Like, normally I could just pour myself into work or escape the house and go out to a bar or whatever it is. But like, I have to deal with this. Like,
I think it's the weirdest thing ever. I mean, this is weirder than any other thing we've ever experienced collectively.
Yeah.
Globally.
Yeah. For
Because,
sure.
it's like sometimes something will happen in one country or in one region, like the
Right.
fires in Australia were horrible. They're horrific.
Right.
But we didn't have fires. We could still go to the store,
Right.
This is unbelievable. And it really is such an opportunity. And I do think we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves. Like, oh, I need to have my whole house organized and I need
Right.
to learn how to play guitar and I need to
Right.
and it's like, I read an article last night that was talking about how we are all collectively grieving.
Yes.
And that hit me. And I go, yes, that's what it is. We are grieving whatever. It's also anticipatory grief.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
When someone is dying or you yourself, you're dying, but we are anticipating, we don't know what's coming also, but we know that there's going to be some type of problems with the financial systems and also just largest losses of lives. And so it's like, we're really collectively going through this thing called grief. So what better time to talk about grief than now?
Right. Yeah. And again, like just listening to your body, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, man, I was really hoping with this extra time that I would be able to do this or this. And I'm just like tired. And I'm like, yeah, your body just needs to rest. Like,
oh my God. Yes.
Give yourself permission to not be productive. Like, it's okay. Like, we live in a society that praises productivity, and that's a good thing for the most part, but when it comes at the cost of your own health, that's when it becomes a problem. And so, and again, like, just as we haven't been taught how to grieve, we haven't really been taught how to take care of ourselves, and give our bodies and listen to our bodies to give our bodies what we need. So
I just posted on Facebook, like, I don't know if it was yesterday morning or Sunday night, but I was like, who has a schedule right now? And who's winging it? And then I was like, I'm going to try to have a schedule. And then Monday morning, oh my God, I couldn't even, I just felt like there was a dark blanket over me, and it sort of felt like depression, but then I wasn't really like your typical depressed. I didn't know what it was. It was just sort of like dampened out and lost. And I felt no inner guidance. And I thought, let me just take a nap. And then when I got up, I felt exactly the same way. So I took a second nap.
And that is awesome.
I know. And then I even went to bed early. I never go to bed early. And I slept all the way through the whole night. And when I woke up this morning, I feel a lot better, but I still feel that feeling. And then when I saw that article last night, I was thinking, that is what it is. I'm grieving right now. I am in deep grief. Yeah.
Yeah. And I honestly think, like, I really, really do believe, like, yes, we're going through immense amount of pain and suffering in the world collectively. And I think that's going to be something that stays with us forever, because this is such a crazy turning point in our world, where I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be something that we just get back to life as we know it. Like, I think life will be forever changed after this.
Yeah, exactly.
But that doesn't mean that we can't heal and rebuild life as we know it in a new and hopefully better way. So,
and I think the people like us that have been through this are going to be the light, the people that shine the light on the path and help, because we have been through such a gut-wrenching loss. And even though it's not going to be the same exact kind of loss, which is what we talked about earlier, everybody has their own experience with it and everything else. But you probably didn't think you were ever going to be in a position to do all the things you're doing right now when you were in the throes of the
for sure.
Right? I mean, explain what you went through.
Oh yeah, for sure. So when Skyler died, like, literally, I could not get out of bed. I had a dog at the time, and his name is Reese. And he's just like the sweetest dog. He was like so well trained. Like, he never peed on the floor ever. And when Skyler died, I mean, my husband went back to work. He had maintained his corporate job again to pay the bills and have health insurance and all of that. And he made sacrifices to go back to work, and kind of like table his grief. Meanwhile, I stayed at home, like, in the full depths of my grief, and like could not move, like could not get out of bed. And one day, really like the whole week after Skyler died, I was just like laying like face down in the pillow, like hoping to suffocate, because I was just like, why am I still here? Like, how come her heart stopped beating and mine is still going? Like, this is just wrong. But he would, Reese would stand by my bed and just whine and whine and whine. And just like this horrible, like, until I would let him out. And I remember there was one day I just like lifted my head up and looked at him and I was like, dude, just pee on the floor. Like, seriously, like, I don't care. I don't want to get up. But finally, again, I'm just like, the empathetic person in me came out and was like, oh, like, I feel so bad for him. He's like holding it for me and I'm not even getting up. I need to get up.
Right.
And so like, honestly, that's the only thing that got me out of bed, was like letting my dog out. Because he was so gracious and such a good dog.
Right.
I just talked
to someone who's a medium, and she, animals are like a really important part of her life, and she can see animal spirits and stuff. And I totally believe
that's so cool.
The animals got me through mine too, my dogs, because just having to let them out and, and
then you get fresh air and then you get sunshine and then you're like, okay, I feel a little bit better about life.
Right. And also I wanted to die too, but with them, I thought, well, they're all rescues and I'm like, who's going to take care of them? So those kind of things, I don't know. Dogs are amazing. Yeah. And cats and birds and whatever else people have.
Totally.
But so I don't think people realize, because you are so amazing and you're doing such amazing work. I don't think they would even be able to understand that you would be in that position.
Well, and like what people don't realize, like a lot of people who meet me and even some of my friends, like look at me and they're like, oh, wow, you're creating this national organization and, like you're doing this and you're doing that. But like every family that I photograph, like I held a special place in my heart for. So like, I can tell you every single one of their names. And if I can't remember their name, I can tell you their story. Like their photos come back to mind immediately. And so when they die, like I'm experiencing a level of grief with every family that we serve, knowing that like when I'm taking their photos, they're dying. And then when they actually die, there's that grief too. And like you said, it's different because I'm, I only met them once. But we have like, most of the time I try and check in on people and carry on a relationship. And so, it's like, the photographers, we have a team of photographer volunteers who help me do this on a bigger scale. And we all experience grief. And that's part of, our photographer training is we have a weekend retreat, for any photographer who wants to join us, and just teaching like, okay, how do you take care of yourself? How do you deal with grief? Like, how do you heal? So that you can keep doing this on a long term, without sacrificing yourself or your family.
That's great.
Because again, like, how can we love people better? Well, if photographers are giving of their time and their talent and their emotions, like it is not responsible of us as an organization to send them out unprepared and then have them burn out and potentially wreck their families because they have all this unresolved grief that they don't know how to deal with. And so that's actually what inspired the corporate care program, because I was teaching this to photographers and was like seeing, some major transformations and was like, dang, like this is actually really good stuff that needs to be out in the world. So all that to say, there's so many things that can help people get through losses, and like you said before, it's like, it depends on the loss of like what modalities would work.
Right.
But that's why the personalized self-care plan is really important. So it's like, well, what makes you feel loved? So for me, like an animal cuddling with me makes me feel loved. Like a hug from my husband, someone asking how my day is and being intentional about, a thoughtful question. And so I like what I recommend and what we take our photographers and our corporate care clients through is, asking that question over and over and over again. We usually set a timer for like 3 to 5 minutes, and you just like ask yourself truly over and over and over again. And so what's fascinating is like, you get through the easy answers first. And then probably like a minute in, you're like, oh, like what else makes me feel loved? And then you're like, all right, you finally come up with another one. And then you have to wait like 30 more seconds. And you're like, dang, like, I don't know what else is like, what else is there? But that's when you get to like the really good stuff. And we encourage people to like think back to a time where you really, really felt loved, or like you felt joy, or you felt peace. Like go back to those moments where you really, really felt it. And like feel it again inside your body, and like think about what was happening, or who you were with, or, like those times, like where you were, to get to some of those answers of like what might help in this moment. So for example,
very practical.
Yeah. So, I had to photograph a baby who was being taken off life support. And the NICU nurse called me, told me the situation. And I was like, okay, like, of course I'll be there, because if I don't show up, this family won't get photos.
Right.
But it was my husband's birthday, and his parents were coming. Yeah. And his parents were coming to take us out to dinner at like 5 p.m. because they like to eat early. And I got the call at 11. And so I was like, okay, I can be there in 30 minutes. So I get there, and it was my understanding that they were willing to have photos, and then I would leave, and then they would take the baby off life support. But when I got there, the mom started freaking out when I pulled my camera out, because she was like, no photos, no photos, no photos. And there's a language barrier. Yeah, there was a language barrier. And the nurse was like, oh, she doesn't want photos with tubes in. And I was like, oh, I don't know if you allow cussing on the show, but I definitely dropped a bomb. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm going to have to watch this baby die.
Oh my gosh.
Because she doesn't want tubes in, but she still wants photos.
Right.
Well, this was the first baby I had witnessed dying since my own daughter.
Ugh.
And I was not prepared for it. So it literally felt like someone pulled a pin on a grenade and like threw it at me and was like, have fun.
Wow.
So I was like panicked. So there's like the shock of that, and then the trauma, because it triggered all of my personal experience with my daughter. And so of course I watched as the parents were wailing, the baby turns from pink to blue, and it's like this horrible experience, but I was still able to capture like these really beautiful moments. And so like, I was like holding back tears, and just trying to do my best. And so then I get to my car afterwards, and I was like, holy crap, like what just happened? And my husband, he was actually in grad school at the time, and he like saw me sitting on the street, because I was just in the truck, kind of just in shock processing. And he was like, came over and knocked on the window and was like, hey, can you give me a ride to such and such place? And I was like, yeah, get in. And he was like, okay, hi to you too. And I was like, dude, I just watched a baby die. Like, I know it's your birthday. I'm sorry I didn't say happy birthday. And I'm sorry I'm in a really horrible mood right now. But like, I have, 4 hours until your parents get here. And I'm going to work really hard to put myself back together by then. But I just need you to give me a freaking break. And he was like, okay, see you later. And it was like, do what you need to do. And I was like, right. Cool. And I sat there, and this was the first time that I was like, okay, like I've trained for this. Like I've studied this. I know, like I should be able to help myself, So I sat there and I was like, okay, Ashley, like, what do you need right now? And I just sat there and listened. And I really like felt my body saying like, I want you to go eat your feelings. And I was like, heck yeah, I can do that.
Finally, so something that I want to do.
Right. So it was like July. So I like went and got like a huge bowl of strawberry ice cream and just started eating it. And I was like, wow, this is actually kind of making me feel better. And I was like, all right, so that worked. And then I was like, okay, what else do you need? And I really felt like, as soon as I asked that, I felt like so much pain all along my spine. And it wasn't like pain that like was like hurt pain, like sore muscle pain, but it was like, I don't know how to describe it other than this, just like deep tension. And I knew it was grief. And so I was like, because again, like the trauma is held in your body.
Right.
So like trauma isn't something that you can just fix with words. Like you have to do body work. And so, so it was something that I was like, okay, I'm going to go get a massage. So I called the spa and was like, you know, the closest spa. I was like, hey, can you squeeze me in? And they're like, can you get here in 15 minutes? Done. So, and I was really intentional, like on the table of like thinking through what I had just been through and like releasing it and letting go of like the connections with my own trauma. And anyway, so after I got off the table, I felt a whole lot better. And I was like, I'm still not all the way together, but that was like a huge step.
Right.
And I was like, I feel like there's one more piece. Like, what do you need? And my body was like, chiropractor, just like lock it all in. And I was like, okay, this is weird, but sure. So
I love that you're doing that. I love that.
Yeah. And so I went to my chiropractor, and as I was walking in, my husband called and was like, my parents just got here. And I was like, cool, I'll meet you at the restaurant. So I go to my chiropractor, and he's like, I go to this chiropractor that's like a vitalistic chiropractor. So they don't actually like twist and crack your bones. They like more adjust your neurological system.
Oh.
And so anyway, they're really cool, and went in there. And again, I was just like very intentional, like while on the table of just like thinking through things and not avoiding it, but also not like wallowing in it. And so anyway, I'm not even kidding you. Like as I walked out of the door, I just like took a deep breath of fresh air, and I was like, I feel like a whole person again. Like,
wow.
Like before, I honestly felt just like a shell of a human where I had zero capability of feeling on the inside, like zero. And I was so numb. Like even when my husband got in, I was like, I don't give like a freaking F, like what you think right now. Like, I don't care if it's your birthday. I don't care. I was like, I just want you to get out of my car and stop talking to me, you know? And, and so, but that's like how severe it was. It was like, I like can't feel right now.
Right.
And so, but like, it was so neat because I was like, I walked into the restaurant and I was like, okay. I was like, hey guys, like was able to give everyone a hug. And like, I wasn't happy, right? Like it's not like I was healed to the point of like having joy and happiness again, but it was like, I feel like a whole human who can manage my emotions and respond in a thoughtful and intelligent way.
God, you're good. That's really good. I mean, and it's so practical. It's little things like eat, massage, you know, things like that. I found Reiki. Do you like Reiki?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I found that. I didn't know. I was always like, oh, I don't know if I really like
I was super skeptical too.
Yeah. And this woman said she wanted to do an exchange. She wants me to teach her like social media and video and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. Oh my God. After the first one, I felt totally different. I was like, this is exactly what I need right now. This is crazy. So yeah, definitely the traumas in your body.
Yeah. There's stuff we don't even know we're holding. But real quick, I want to add on another story that'll be much shorter. Because I think it's important to distinguish, that it can be the same grief and your body will not respond in the same way. So a month later, I got the same phone call. A NICU nurse called me, was like, hey, this baby's going to die. We need you to come take pictures. Same situation. But this time I knew ahead of time that that's what was going to happen. So there wasn't the shock and trauma that I had at the first one.
Right.
And then it was also not on any significant day. And I did the session, and I mean, the nurses and I were all crying in the hallway afterwards. So there was definitely grief. But like I got back to my car and I was like, okay, what do you need? And I was like, you want some ice cream? And my body was like, no. And I was like, really? No ice cream? All right. And then I was like, well, do you want a massage? Because that sounds really nice right now. And my body was like, no massage. I'm good. And I was like, what? I was like, no massage? Like, who says no to a massage? And then I was like, chiropractic care? Like, anything? And my body was like, no, just go back to work. And I was like, all right, that's weird.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. And so I was like, I went back to work and I sat at my desk and was just like poured myself into the stuff that I had on my list and was like, okay, like I will sit here until you tell me what you need. And I'm just going to work. And I worked until 10 p.m. And finally my body was like, okay, that's good. You can call it a day. Go home and get some sleep. And I was like, that was so weird. But like my body just needed to be productive. And like, I wasn't like the tasks that I was doing, like I could still think and process feelings while I was doing them. And I think it was just like a safe way for me to feel everything and like process while still being productive and feeling like I was getting stuff done. And that's just what I needed that day. And so it was like the exact same situation, but like very different circumstances and then a very, very different way of grieving. And so I just wanted people to know that second story because I think it's really important to like, again, like your body is a communicator in this life. It's not just a vessel. And so if we can listen to our bodies and hear them, like they can guide us through healing of like what we need. But so many people have gotten to a place of not hearing their body or just numbing it or, silencing it. That I think that's kind of like the first step. If you're like, what are you talking about? Like you can hear your body talk to you. I would really encourage people to develop mindfulness and meditation practices as a way of just starting to get comfortable being present with uncomfortable feelings.
Really, really good information. Thank you so much, Ashley. And I also want to say that right now I'm actually thinking about the whole body part of the physical dimension in terms of my other documentaries about dreams and people have dreams, personal dreams. And that's something I always neglected because I'm always putting myself way out there in the world. And I got all these big things. I've started a film festival, I've got all these big things that are sort of involving my third eye and like manifestation. And I don't pull back and take care of myself enough.
Yeah.
And definitely like grief will reveal that as well when you're going through that.
Oh yeah.
So I really appreciate you saying all of that. And also I want to say that even the fact that even happened, the baby, the first one and the second one, I totally believe the universe guides us to where we need the healing, where there's an opportunity for a little bit more maybe. And, so you being in those situations was a huge opportunity for you to have these new jewels of wisdom now. And
absolutely.
Or to strengthen a jewel of wisdom you may already have. Because like one of my interviews, the first one I published on the podcast was a guy who was run over by a train. And I remember when I saw the video, because Derek was run over by a train.
Yes, yeah.
I just felt, because I couldn't watch anything. And you'd be surprised how many things are on TV or in movies that are people on train tracks. I never noticed it before. And still since then, I don't see it as much. But right after he died, it was like every time I turned around, there was a train track and someone falling down. It was in the news. I was like, ugh. But yeah, so when I almost clicked off of that and something told me, just watch it. It was something on YouTube on The Guardian. So I watched it and it was about David Ditchfield and he was run over by the train. But he didn't leave his body. He was aware of the whole time he was underneath the train, which was like,
oh, wow.
My biggest fear about Derek.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had a visitation with him where he showed me he left his body before the train hit him. And so that helped me heal. And that was the hardest part, getting over the physical part. But then when David was talking, I go, so he's like, oh no, I was totally aware of everything going on. I was underneath the train. I'm like, oh my God, his arm got severed. I was like, oh, what? But he had this amazing experience. He doesn't fear death, like all these different things. So it's like, we go to where, I don't know, we're led to where we need that healing. And that really helped me because even if Derek was conscious,
right,
he had some kind of experience, I believe, that made it all okay. And he wasn't, like what I would think. I think the fear is worse than actual.
Oh, certainly. Well, yeah, like, so one thing I speak on a lot is, I really believe that every decision we make comes down to love or fear. And so, like, what are we afraid of? And what is that preventing us from doing in this world? Right. So like, especially showing up for people. So it's like, like that's part of the community support program. It's like for people who are so afraid of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, they're letting fear stop them from loving someone. That fear holds us back from being and achieving and just like growing into what we need to be. For me, it was like the fear of like not being able to handle all of the hard emotions, right? Like, 'cause I'm entering into grief on a regular basis, knowingly.
Right.
And people ask me all the time, like, well, how do you do what you do? And I'm like, well, honestly, like the question for me is like, how could I not? Because like I have the information and I have the experience. And just like you said, like my whole life has kind of like led me to this point. And had I let fear get in the way, Love Not Lost would not exist.
Right.
And all of these people would not be helped as a result and would not have the healing or the tools they need to heal. And so, yeah, so it's like kind of coming back to like, what are we afraid of and why? And then like in those situations, what does it actually look like to choose love?
Exactly.
And it could be love for ourselves or love for someone else or, but just like really analyzing our decisions in life of like, okay, in this moment, are we choosing love or fear?
Right. Well, I love you. I think you're like
Well,
amazing. And I'm not afraid to say it. No, I always do that though. Like a UPS driver, I'm like, I love you. You just dropped off the best package. And my friends are always like, why do you do that? No, but I do. I think that what you're doing is so incredible. And you're giving so much practical needed. Those types of things are needed. Like it's good to have people talk in a way that uplifts people and gives them hope. But what a lot of people really need, aside from all that, is the practical stuff. And you have so many great, incredible, the photography session, the form email list, the corporate training to show people how to grieve in the workplace, like just on and on and on, in your book and everything. So I know that I want to interview you again. So if you want to come back,
okay,
great.
yes,
You're good.
Love it.
I think you have so much product and so much service, and there's so many things you do that I could check back in with you and you're probably like, okay, so we were in another country and what we found out. I'm like, oh my God, tell me everything. But okay, good. So can you tell everybody listening where they can reach you and how they can get involved, how they can either any part of it? Go ahead.
Yep. So our corporate care program is at a national level. So we will travel anywhere to companies who want our training. As of right now, we are working on a way to do that virtually based on our current pandemic. But that is still in the works. As far as photographers, our photography program is just in the state of Georgia right now. So if you're in the state of Georgia and you want to volunteer, that is absolutely something you can sign up on our website. If you're a photographer in another state, you can still apply, and we would love to have your contact information and your application. So when we spread to your state, we will notify you. And we are looking to expand as early as next year to start going, up the East Coast and then out to the West Coast. So, and then for the community support program, anyone with an email can participate in that. So howcaniloveyoubetter.com. If you want any of our physical support tools, you can contact us through our website. My email is ashley@lovenotlost.org. You're welcome to email me directly. And then on social media, we are at lovenotlost.org. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, maybe Pinterest and TikTok. We're still playing around with those. So
I think everybody should be on TikTok, even though I don't have my businesses there. And then Pinterest, I need to get on there. I know. Great indexing of information. Okay. So thank you so much. Thank you for all this. I'm going to also have all the links on the show notes on deathtalkpodcast.com. And you'll just go to this episode and look for Ashley Jones. I don't know what number it'll be yet, but it's Ashley Jones and lovenotlost.org. And thank you again. And I look forward to talking with you again in the future. And,
Absolutely.
congratulations on really providing so much for the world and for every other person that's going to be going through this or is currently going through this. You're giving back so much practical, loving tools. And so I just really, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me a platform. I mean, this is awesome. And I just love your podcast as well. I think it's so important. So let's, just like get death and dying and grief into a normal, non-stigma place. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. All the links and anything that I mentioned in today's episode will be available on deathtalkpodcast.com in the show notes. Thank you so much.